So our next presenter is the founder and executive director of a fantastic community organization called Trust South LA. Her name is Sandra McNeil, and in many ways, Sandra is part of the TEDxSkidRow, not only part of the community, but a leader in our community, because that delicious salad that we all enjoyed, she actually stepped out to cut all the vegetables, a lot of the planning that goes into the TEDxSkidRow last year and this year. Sandra is an integral part of that. She's Cooper Bates' partner, but what I wanted her to share here was her inspiring work in terms of how she's building community and how she's giving others a platform to speak up and have a voice in the decisions that are being made in their communities. So, Sandra McNeil.
Thank you so much. I've been doing community work for about 10 years by the time I arrived in LA in 1995. I had been running an adult literacy center in Seattle's Rainier Valley. And it was there that I had many mentors, people in their golden years who had had a chance to come back to brush up on the basics after a lifetime of raising families and working. And I walked into that work in my 20s with a good formal education and a furious work ethic, and thankfully a lot of humility. And I walked away from that work with a deep understanding that in order to craft viable and relevant solutions to the thorniest problems that we have in our society, we need collaboration, and we need collective analysis. And we need to draw on life experience. And those have really been tenets for me throughout the time I've worked, the community work I've done. There's a beautiful quote by one of the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement, Miles Horton. He said, "We make the road by walking." And I know that from Georgia Rogers, one of the great mentors that I had during those years, a woman who in her 60s came to our center to learn to read. By 62, she was teaching others to read, and by 64, she was teaching others to write. I learned so much from Georgia's ferocious pursuit, her tenacious pursuit of her own education that had been denied her as a child raised in a Southern sharecropping family. But what really most impressed me about Georgia was the fact that she turned around and served others. She worked to turn around the lives of other people through education. I know from Georgia and from so many others that it takes innumerable feet of all shapes and sizes to contour the path to justice. This is me starting my walk in LA. I finished a couple years at the Excellent Master's program in Urban Planning at UCLA. And I'd had the honor of working with a group of community organizers to start an economic justice organization called SAGE. It's actually located just 15 blocks from where we are now in the northmost part of South Central Los Angeles. Here's me with my daughter, Zayden Lee Bates. This is the place where she took her first steps and attended her first campaign meetings, not in that order. This is me and Zayden just a few days ago. Lot has transformed in these years. One transformation, you see my wardrobe. I no longer wear colorless, shapeless t-shirts, especially not when the press is going to snap a photo of me. My daughter obviously has transformed into a mature, conscious, articulate young woman. And our neighborhood has transformed. This neighborhood, this north part of South Central, has been gentrified. We've been moving through this process, which I know you're familiar with. It's been happening in urban cores, has happened in urban cores all over the country. So I'll just run through this. What is gentrification? People of color move into a neighborhood, white folks decide they have to get out. There's a process of disinvestment. There's corporate and government policies that lead to that. Redlining, predatory lending. Home ownership rates are low because of those policies. And there's disinvestment. You see, obviously, property values in the neighborhood fall. At some point, the hipsters arrive, right? Cool people are like, whoa, I discovered this really great neighborhood and it's really cheap. Artists, mixed families like mine. In this neighborhood, also historic preservationists and college students. And then government and corporations decide, hey, what a great neighborhood, we should invest there. And they start putting money in. Property values go up, white folks return, and low-income people of color are displaced. This has happened with a fury in this neighborhood. The Staples Center was built and opened its doors in 2000. In 2001, the plans for LA Live were approved by the city. Developers started snatching up buildings downtown to turn them into luxury apartments and condos. Similarly, we've seen the University of Southern California continue to grow and gain stature, now drawing over 50% of its student body from out of the state of California, many of them international students. And this has all impacted property values in the neighborhood. Between 2002 and 2006, property values in this neighborhood went up by 250%. This is what happens to a neighborhood when you see that kind of change. You see a community displaced. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one important institution and their experience. St. Mark's Church is located also about 15 blocks from where we are right now. It's over a century old, is a community serving congregation. They are married to this neighborhood. They believe in giving back to this neighborhood. Their congregants used to come from this neighborhood. This was a map that we did with some of the congregation in 1999. All of the light blue that you see here, those are where families were living, in houses, in small apartment buildings. Most of them didn't own. In our neighborhoods, less than 15% of families are homeowners. So they were renters, largely. This is the same neighborhood 10 years later. All of the dark blue you see is housing that's occupied by students. And the light blue is where families live. Can I do that again? In a decade, there were just a little bit of student housing, almost entirely converted to students. There are tremendous impacts from seeing a community turned over like this. Ms. Pickett, who ran community programs at St. Mark's for decades and lived in one of the remaining light blue houses here, when we were making this map, she said, you know, I feel like my neighborhood has become a ghost town. That I don't know anybody anymore. The people walk by, they're like apparitions. No one comes to greet me on my porch. No one asks after my health. No one comes and borrows eggs. The neighborhood is changing. We are wanting as a community to seek strategies so that the community won't be displaced, so that we don't have more ghost towns, so that we have means to maintain social networks in the community that are so vital to make life possible, in particular for working class people. We don't want people in the situation where they're having to move their kids from one school to another because they can no longer afford rents in this neighborhood, or that they are so desperate to keep their kids in the same school that they decide to go ahead and move into the garage behind their neighbor's house and live with their family there because that's all the rent that they can afford. We need long-term solutions. And we were really clear as a community about that. We need long-term solutions to the challenges of neighborhoods where property values are going up, but people want to stay and want to be part of the neighborhood even as it improves. In 2002, we sent a group of community leaders to the East Coast to talk to some neighborhoods there about how were they facing similar problems of gentrification and displacement. And they came back to us and said, you know what? We've got to organize. Bottom line, we have to remain organized as a community. And then they said, The other thing we have to do, we have to acquire land. We have to control land. Without the control of land, we ultimately are going to be forced out of this neighborhood. And it was at this moment that our commitment as a community to community control of land was birthed. So this is what came of it. Our organization, Trust South LA, is a community-based organization. We're a membership-controlled organization that's set up specifically to steward land in perpetuity, to have working-class people from this community-controlled land. The name, which was created by our members, it stands for Tenemos que reclamar y unidos salvar la tierra, which means together we must reclaim and save the land. In seeking a model, we looked at how have other people, and internationally and nationally, held land as communities. There are now over 300 community land trusts all over the United States. The origin of community land trusts in this country actually came from the land grants movement in India. There's history also in the African American farming communities in the American South in the 70s who used land trusts as a way to save their communities and their relationship to the land. When we started our community land trust, we very specifically drew on a model of establishing a nonprofit that is legally controlled by the community. So our members have legal authority over decisions in the organization. Membership is restricted to people who live and work in the part of South Central where we're located. Members have to be below a certain income level so that when we build affordable housing on our land, they could qualify to live there. And here in this neighborhood, we're talking, our income limits are $48,000 a year for a family of 4. That's actually twice the median income in this neighborhood. Our members pay dues and participate as volunteers in the organization, and importantly, they make decisions for the organization. We have a majority elected board of directors. So our board of directors comes from our membership, and they're voted in by their membership, and they answer to the membership. There are some key decisions, in fact, that are only made by members of the organization. For example, the board can't decide to sell land. That can only be a decision made by the membership. It's a form of very direct democracy that I don't think we see a lot in this country, and or many places. And it really obligates us to an ongoing process of community leadership development and real capacity building. And these are impacts that in and of themselves have long-term effect on the neighborhood. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you examples of a couple of our projects and how they've developed, and looking at our different approaches to land stewardship. So these two wonderful people are David Mosley and Delmi Arteaga, two leaders in our organization. David and Delmi's families both lived for over 17 years in a building called Roland Curtis Gardens. It's located in a key location. It's right a stone's throw from the new Vermont light rail station of the new Expo line. It's a block from USC, a block from Exposition Park. It's become very desirable property. And that's exactly what the former owner, who is a multi-billionaire from West Palm Beach by the name of Jeff Green, he makes the Forbes 400 list of the world's richest men, or the country's richest men every year. Mr. Green decided that the moment that the property was the government was no longer requiring him through covenants to keep the housing affordable, he sent 30-day notices to quit the building to all 48 families living there. 48 families, some of whom have been living there 25, 30 years. Obviously, the tenants weren't game. And we went in and worked with them. A year and a half we spent in a campaign, and at the end of that time, Mr. Green decided he was going to go ahead and sell the property. And we were able to purchase the building. Trust South LA, jointly with an affordable housing development partner of ours, Abode Communities. And we've been going through an amazing process with the tenants and their neighbors of actually planning for a rebuild of the site. We've been engaged over 100. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. So we've been working to plan what the future is of Roland Curtis Gardens through a very extensive participatory process. And we're ready to take plans to the city for the development of 140 permanently affordable homes for families that will be here in this excellent location. It's commercial uses along Exposition, and we're looking at having a community health clinic there along with some other kinds of uses, open space. And this place, we're actually going to be one of the very first projects going through the city saying we're willing to reduce parking. We want to reduce parking, and in exchange for that, we're going to do bike share programs, we're going to do car share programs, we're going to increase access to public transit for the residents and their neighbors, and we're also going to work on pedestrian and bicycle access to and from this site and throughout South Los Angeles. It's a cutting-edge transit-oriented development project. The public officials in the city are really interested, and we've been getting a lot of support, and it all happened because the tenants were really willing to fight for what their rights were. Thank you. So that project, it's an example of one of our multifamily projects, which is using resources subsidy and equity in affordable housing development to secure land that'll be held and stored in perpetuity by the community. This is a whole nother project that we're just piloting now. The Community Mosaic Project. We are looking at the 3,000 acres of single-family properties just in South Los Angeles. There's tremendous opportunity to provide quality, affordable housing to more families by increasing the availability of housing on those single-family lots. It's a vision. There are many challenges we're faced now with pulling this off, but our whole model is that we look at purchasing foreclosed properties, identifying, doing rehab of the house in the front, and then putting a modular home or a manufactured home on the back as an accessory unit, basically a backyard home. So we're doubling the number of families that can live there in quality and affordable conditions. And initially, we'll be renting the housing. Eventually, we'd like to have that housing all owned in a tenant-owned and managed cooperative. It's a model that we're really interested in for a number of reasons. We believe that LA, which is very substantially made up of single-family neighborhoods, this is an opportunity to build out more housing in desirable neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are close to transit, and to do it in an affordable way. The total per subsidy cost on each unit will be significantly lower than what it takes to build a new affordable multifamily unit. We also, so many people on my street live in garages, live in some standard granny units, and it's an opportunity to replace those with quality housing. And importantly for us, our neighborhood has been ravished by the impacts of the last downturn in the housing market, and now the upturn, with speculators coming in, purchasing at a much higher rate than we're seeing in the rest of the county. We have to have strategies to challenge speculation and to be used in this downturn and upturn of the market and in the next one. So this is a means for us to look at a long-term strategy to have community control of individual parcels of land where single-family homes are. And then finally, 30% of the land in South LA is streets. And at the same time, our council districts, 8 and 9, are the most park-poor city council districts in the city. We've been looking at strategies about how do we better utilize streets, how do we better utilize public spaces. We've been involved since the 2010, the first successful Ciclavia event that did a street closure in downtown. We've been working with the Ciclavia and brought that street closure event to South LA for the first time last year. And we have a vision of doing street closures in an ongoing way in South LA to create park space from our streets. We've also been very active in now working with Department of Transportation on how do we create streets where we divert car traffic and put in more pedestrian and bike resources onto those streets to make them more available to South LA's many bicyclists and pedestrians. So that's a whole another area of work that we've been engaged in the last couple of years. It takes all of us, many of us, to do this work, and importantly, it takes many of us who are willing to do the work for those who come after us. I've been moved by our members who understand when they commit to the work of our organization that they won't personally benefit from it. Much like Georgia, my mentor in Seattle, who turned her education around to help others transform their lives, I see our members commit to create viable and sustainable neighborhoods in South Los Angeles for when their children are adults and for when their neighbors' children are adults. And I really hear those words, we make the road by walking, with consciousness, with creativity, with passion, with hope. And I encourage you all to support and walk in solidarity with the communities of South LA and Skid Row, and to seek out innovative practices in community development and to support those. And I encourage all of you to find your own pursuit of the path to justice. Thank you.